Welcome back to my channel. This time, as promised, a battle report with the Demon Legions. So this is the army list that I put together with the models that I have available. I can do a little bit of variation here and there in the army, but basically this is the core setup that I probably am gonna stick to, just because of the model limitation that I have. Um, I have some models with guns. I could theoretically also put them down as lemurs and use the models that I currently use as lemurs as succubi maybe. But I'm not too big of a fan of that because you have models with guns, so you would expect something that shoots. Um, yeah, so let's just go through it a bit quickly. So I have a Scourge and a Maw. A lot of the competitive Demon Legion lists now feature two greater demons, and I think it's a really fun way to play, and it's also quite a strong way to play, I think. So with the supportive magic, you can get off a lot of close combat buffs, and provided on the greater demons they don't work as well as on the other pieces in your army you have, just because you have less attacks on these models, obviously. So I think Avocation might not even be the best lore on the Scourge, because you'd rather hex the opponent than to buff yourself with like a reroll to hit or to wound. So I'm not really set on the magic setup yet, but the two greater demons are a lot of fun to play. So well, I don't know if my viewers are going to be able to recognize what these models are. The Scourge is basically the bloodthirster of the good old days. Right now it's a model with agility 0, so it always strikes later because great weapons even strike at agility 1, I believe. So yeah, he really strikes last, but he has devastating charge, distracting, and he has defensive 4 with parry in this case because I gave him living shield. So a lot of people or a lot of models will only hit him on 5+ when he charges. And he has the rage rule of the giant, so he starts with 5 attacks at offensive 7 with battle focus. For each wound that he's gonna get, he gets an additional attack. They're at strength 7. So he does do a lot of damage. Just the question is whether he's gonna survive the opponent's attacks before he's doing the damage. But he has 7 hit points, so most cases that should be fine. So the setup I gave him is the chitinous scales, so he has a 5 of armor save against a small fire. Then kaleidoscopic flesh to give him hard target 1. I think this is one of the best setups that you can do. He knocks in 955 points, so he is really expensive. But I think it's a piece that you can just throw forward, see what your opponent does with it, and if your opponent doesn't have a lot of glass cannons that strike before him, that just have an insane damage output, then he's gonna wreck something, that's for sure. Then we have the Maw of Akan. The Maw of Akan used to be the Great Unclean One, the big daddy of Nurgle. So he has 9 hit points. I think it's interesting to field both the Scourge and the Maw together because these are the greater demons that have more hit points than the others. And then I upgraded him with Wizard Out of the Witchcraft. You can also take something else, I think Divination maybe or something, but I really like Witchcraft as a lore in general. But you have to have it as a supportive lore. Like if it's the only lore that you rely on, then you're not gonna. The spells are so specific that you don't get the highest value out of a list with just a wizard master on witchcraft. But here I think he fits nicely, because some of the spells enable opportunities that you don't really see coming. Like the Raven's Wing is nice, probably also just with a Maw, because it's a bit of a piece that doesn't care in some situations if it gets charged by something. And you have some other advantages of witchcraft. Deceptive Glamour, for example, is a really potent spell because you can cast it on a 4+ or a 6+. Usually when you cast it on a 4+, you can just cast it for the effect of the attribute, for the +1 advance somewhere. Combined with a Vanadra Scourge and a Maw, these advantages, these movement advantages, increasements, are really potent. The Maw has the shit ton of skills to get him to Resilience 6, and now that 5 of armor save and the Iron Ask to get him to Resilience 6. The core I briefly mentioned, I put Margot the internal champion just because I don't like to have to struggle in dealing with single models in my opponent's army. The Myrmidons have hot blood because it was a nice upgrade to fill up my core points. So this gives them +2 agility on the charge, meaning that they can go forward in a position where my opponent has to risk a charge. And if my opponent doesn't, then I will get a charge and strike first. So these are 250 point units. I think they're great for just giving your opponent the dilemma of either charging in or being charged the next round. So I can sacrifice them basically. There's just some form of chaff in my army. The Lemurs are just to get something stuck. The Furies are chaff. Veil Serpents, they have a champion, so they are Wizard Conclave. I always underestimate the combat power of this unit, but basically there are 3 ogres with a 5-up Aegis save, and the champion is a Wizard Adept. So with 3 Wizard Adepts, I'm quite comfortable in Daemon Legions. 2 Blazing Glories to deal with the armor, because generally demons struggle a bit with armor, but Blazing Glories definitely don't. And then 3 Brazen Beasts with the centipede legs. In the combination with Witchcraft, I really like those, because they're really, really potent on the charge. Now, let's see what my opponent has. He took his Beast Herds list, so he has been playing with a list with 3 blocks of 6 Minotaurs. And this time he went for a little bit of a more friendly setup with a Gortark instead of the 3rd block of Minotaurs to deviate a little bit away from 20-0 list, and yeah, the rest of the list is just a good list. So let's see what's going to happen on the table. We were just playing Frontline Clash just to keep it simple, no secondary objective. Just because my opponent wasn't that accustomed to demons yet. He hasn't played them at all since 2 years or so. And then for me, it's obviously the first time I play with this list myself. I have faced off demons a couple of times at tournaments, so I do have a bit of a knowledge of the rules and the roles of the specific units in the list. However, for me, this is, besides Vampire Counts, the first time that I play with an army with just Fearless troops. And without any Warriors of the Dark Gods portal shenanigans. So for me it's also a little bit strange to play this army, because I'm really used to being able to still flee with some pieces. However, demons can be really aggressive, and I think this is also an army that has the potential of really going in. I have the 2 units of imps in my list, so I can also wait out a little bit what my opponent's going to do. But I feel like demons also have a little bit of pressure on their side, because they're not one of the armies that can really last a long time and just endure shooting for a long time. Against shooty lists, they probably have to close the gap quite quickly and get in combat. So yeah, we're just switching out deployments. My opponent, I didn't realize by this time, because I was more focused on my own troops than my opponent's troops. But my opponent has already deployed his 2 Minotaur blocks, and these are basically the most important drops in his army. Because the Beast Lords on the chariots, they are gonna be around the Minotaurs just to help them get their job done. And I think maybe against my list, my opponent should not have done that, because the 1-up armor save and the 2-up rerollable armor save models are really potent pieces against demons, because I don't have that much AP in my army, other than the Blazing Glories and the Maw and the Scourge. So in terms of normally demons doesn't have that much AP. In this list, maybe I'm bringing kind of as much AP as I can bring. But once I realized that my opponent had put down his 2 Minotaur blocks down, I deployed everything. This was also a good thing, because I didn't really account for the base size of the maul when I was deploying my Brazen Beast. I mean, the base size of the maul is as big as the unit of Brazen Beast, so that was a bit of a surprise. I still have to get used to deploying my maul and keeping sufficient space available for it. You can see what kind of deployment I went with in the end. I'm gonna have a +2 on my roll to start, because my opponent only has his Gorgon and the characters left, and the gargoyles on the left are scouting. So it's still a bit of a risk whether I'll go first or not. If my opponent goes first, I kind of zone him out with the maul, with the Scourge, and even with the Veil Serpents. I mean, if he wants to put the dogs up my face, then I'm fine with it, and the Veil Serpents can just deal with that. And otherwise, I still have, I think I still have sufficient threats all around to deal with the pieces my opponent can bring. This is the deployment that we eventually end up with. And as you can see, I used the unit cards that I printed out that I showed in a video earlier to indicate what unit is where. Yeah, about my deployment, it's made a lot easier by the fact that there's some impossible on the right, some ruins on the left, and the fact that my opponent already deployed the Minotaurs. So I have my Scourge and my Maul basically to go into the Minotaurs, the Blazing Glories to keep my flanks clean. If my opponent's going to ambush and he's going to go on the flanks, then I have the Blazing Glories to cause fear to deal with those, because my opponent's going to hit them on 6s. If he fails the fear test, yes. And I'm gonna hit him on 2s. I have a stomp. I have 5 attacks. I'm gonna just mop up these reinforcements of his really easily. And yeah, the Blazing Glories aren't that needed against any of his pieces in the center, other than against the Chariot Lords. They would be nice with AB5. But I feel like the Scourge and the Maw should also be able to handle this. I have the imps that are going to be able to make sure that my opponent has to come towards me also. I like having them in the list right now. But then again, Beast Herds is also a good matchup for them with their Strength 5 AP0. The Brazen Beasts are a little bit in the back. I think they're a really good counter charge unit. So they have Advance 8, and I can go to Advance 9 with the Witchcraft attribute, or even Advance 10. And they're really good on the charge. But yeah, if you put them in your front line, then your opponent's going to be able to predict that they're going to charge, and he's just going to respect the distance. Whilst if you force your opponent to get into a tricky situation and you set them up for the counter charge, then they probably are way more valuable. So this is the deployment, and then we go into the battle. So my opponent first still has the Vanguard with his Warhounds. Then we do the dice off. With the +2 bonus, I win the dice off, and I get to take the first turn. Now, what am I thinking in this situation is that I kind of want to force my army through the center. My Maw and my Scourge have a higher advance rate than my opponent's Minotaurs. The Minotaurs of my opponent do get +1 advance because of the Chariot in the charge phase, though, but I can mitigate that with the Witchcraft attribute. Also, if my opponent does charge in his Minotaurs into my Maw, I'm not that sure what's gonna happen. He's gonna do a lot of hits. He's gonna have a 5 up to wound. I'm gonna have a 5 up save after that. I might still be okay. So, as previously described, I can just move them all forward. Basically, use the Brazen Beasts to set up a counter charge if my opponent goes in. And right now I'm still respecting the charge range of my opponent. I believe he needs an 11 for his Minotaurs on the right. If he wants to go into my Maw, to go into my Maw, then it's fine by me, because a field charge for him means that I keep the initiative. I get another magic phase where I can cast. So seeing the matchup, actually, I probably shouldn't have been as aggressive as I was. But, well, this is the first time that I'm trying this out also. Yeah, the small thing that is noticeable still probably is the Myrmidons on the right. So the Myrmidons on the right, they also did quite an aggressive move. My opponent's centaurs are really capable, really easily capable of charging in. That's fine by me. If they charge in, we would strike at the same initiative. My opponent can still boost it with Totem. But that is one that I could easily dispel. If we strike at the same time, I'm going to strike with 9 attacks, sitting on 3+, wounding on 2+, on 3+ also, so probably I'll do 4 wounds, and this unit is just crippled. I do have a Blazing Glory set up in order to countercharge, or if my opponent ambushes to charge anything that's going to ambush. And in the magic phase, I do a Raven's Wing on the unit to try and panic off the gargoyles. So luckily, actually, I didn't panic off the gargoyles, because otherwise my opponents would have had a charge with the Minotaurs on the right onto my Myrmidons, and right now this charge is being blocked by the gargoyles that don't have any target to charge at themselves. So that is quite ideal for me, basically, because we're looking at it, and he definitely doesn't have the space in order to contact my base there. Yeah, so this is my first turn move. I put the Witchcraft attribute on the Scourge on the left, so he has +1 move. This model has a fly move of 7 and a ground movement of 8, so with the attribute on it, he goes to an advance of 9, which is actually pretty high for such a potent combat character. I really like Witchcraft with the Daemon Legions so far, just because of the move. But probably I'm playing it as a really aggressive army. Because, yeah, against these beast turrets, I could have waited out a turn and just have some shooting with the imps. But even then, the imps are gonna hit on 5s, are gonna wound on 3+. So with a total of 20 shots, that would be 6 hits, it would be 4 wounds. I don't know if it's really worth it against the Druidism Mage. So I could try to get in some more shooting, but I think you really have to invest deep into the shooting to be able to make it work. And to the extent that you can't play a Scourge and a Moss together. And I think the Scourge and a Moss together, they really work well as two incredibly potent characters that have to be dealt with by your opponent on a short notice, because you can play them really aggressively. The more has sufficient health points, the Scourge only benefits from getting charged by something scary. And then, yeah, these are two threats that your opponent has to deal with. So my opponent is trying to deal with them, and I think he didn't see my Scourge on the left, maybe because of the single tree on the field. But what I'm seeing here is just a possible charge with my Scourge on the left and the Maw on the right into his Minotaurs. And later, when we measured out the base size of the Maw, he also admitted that he didn't have sufficient movement with his Warhounds in order to block my Maw from getting in. I must say he did have sufficient move with his Gargoyles that were near the Myrmidons on the right. But he was really eager to make sure that my Myrmidons were gonna not survive this battle. And I didn't exactly know why, so I felt like he focused a little bit too much on the Myrmidons. For me, it started out as a flank that, well, I could lose the flank. If I lose the flank, then it's fine, because by the time that it really matters, that his troops are going to overrun and stuff, I'm out of there anyway, hopefully. So worst case, he could get a charge with a diminished unit of centaurs into my Maw or the imps, and if he goes in the imps, it's also fine. I mean, they're 10 imps. He can just try to mop them up over time, but I don't really care. In terms of magic, my opponent casted first Oaken Throne and he got an 11 on 2 dice. And I thought, well, next turn I'm gonna go into the Minotaurs on the right. I really want to, so I can't afford to have Oaken Throne up, because then either the resilience of them is gonna be too high, or they're gonna have a 4-up regeneration save. So I decided to dispel it, and then I also managed to dispel the regen save on them. Luckily, my opponent did not manage to get +2 resilience on them, but he did get, because of that, he was quite free to use his token on the right to get +4 agility. And then the centaurs, they did 8 or 9 wounds, and I saved. No, they did 9 wounds, I believe, and I saved 5 or 6 of those. So that was really bad for my opponent, because that meant that I got some attacks back to strike, and I was able to just get one centaur down. And here you can see that we measure out how the Maw and the Scourge would move in order to contact the unit. So the Maw can go on the left side, the Scourge can go on the right side. The Maw doesn't fly, the Scourge does fly, so I could use the flying move to go over the dogs if I wanted. I don't actually have to, because in a charge, charging units can ignore each other for the purposes of their footprint. So whilst it doesn't really make sense that you're able to charge with a Scourge through the Maw, you are able to, and it does make a 1-inch difference of being able to get the charge or not. Yeah, so they happily go into the Minotaurs, and then the Veil Serpents go into the flank of the dogs. Yeah, I really like how these Veil Serpents got changed compared to the previous iterations of Demon Legions back in the good old days. Because they used to be like really wimps in combat with like 2 strength 3 attacks, or even 1. Now they have 3 strength 4 attacks each, and they have Stomps, and they have resilience 4, they have decent defensive, and 5 Abegas. So they're actually like a unit of ogres nearly, and I think that really changes them in their role. On the right, the Blazing Glory did try to charge into the Centaurs, but was not able to, so I'm gonna have to sustain another round of combat there. And then on top, I have a unit of Furies that I'm gonna sacrifice because I feel that I don't really have the need for them elsewhere, so they can be used to hold up the Wild Horns, so that the back of my Brazen Beasts is at least covered, and the other unit is gonna be held up by Imps. Probably they're not gonna last long in combat, but I have a unit of Myrmidons that I turned around in order to be able to deal with these threats. On the left, I have a Blazing Glory that moved up aggressively. I have the Imps, the Lemures that try to pace up with the Scourge and the Maw. And then we go to my magic phase. My magic phase kicks ass. So first I get a Mighty Unbeliever on my opponent's Centaurs, then I get the Evocation Spectral Blades on my Maw, and I get another spell. I get the Deceptive Glamour on my opponent's Minotaurs for -2 offensive, defensive, and agility, so that the Scourge actually strikes at the same time as my opponent, but I do get to hit my opponent's Minotaurs on a 2+ with my Maw. I believe that was all the magic, yeah. But that is really good already. So I think that the magic could still use a little bit of tuning, because right now, I mean, it does make sense to have the Witchcraft magic that hexes your opponent unit, but the Evocation magic I'm not too sold about, because you have a model with strength 6, you have a model with strength 7, and you can cast a reroll to wound on them. Or an Ancestral 8, but you're also hitting quite easily. So I don't really know if navigation is the way to go here, even though it does guarantee that you get the output that you. Maybe I will switch over to Thaumaturgy for a try of just having Mighty Unbeliever and speaking in tongues on the Scourge, because speaking in tongues can also be really interesting, just to deny the commanding presence of your opponent. But for this game, we just stopped here, to be honest. So I was able to mop up the Minotaurs, make them break. I would have an overrun into my opponent's BSB and his general with respectively the Maw and the Scourge. That was not a really good situation for my opponent to be in. And I think we could have played on, but it would not have made too much sense, probably. So I hope you still enjoyed this battle report, even though it was a short one. I hope it gave you some creative ideas about Demon Legions in general, and I'm certainly gonna try this army out a little bit more often. Thank you for watching, and see you the next time.